We think we need another 83,000 skilled tradespeople
Across
to go
the board.
straight into the national workforce in order to build our federal government's stated target, which is 1.2 million homes over 5 years.
Yes, love that.
So, which, by the way, we've never ever done that.
Yeah.
We're still the halls of parliament saying we're taxing housing too much.
Yeah,
we're still saying we need to look at the pace of the regulation.
Yeah. Builders, tradies, and construction pros. This episode is brought to you by Dawson's, your trusted building supply partner for over 140 years. From truss and frame, from timber to tools, cladding to hardware, Dawson's has everything you need to get the job done. With a network of 42 stores across New South Wales, ACT, and Victoria, and a team that knows the building trade inside and out. They're not just about the products, they're about solutions and helping you succeed. So whether you're Australian, building the dream home, or you're a tradesman doing renovations, you just need reliable supplies on site. Australian family-owned Dawson's has your back. Visit dawsons.com.au or pop into the store today and say, hey, Dawson's for the builder. It's very low-key. All I need you to do to start is just say your name, where you're from, and I'll roll from there, man.
Matt King, and Senior Economist at HIA.
Nice. That's a very fancy title, man. Do you have a nice badge to go with that as well? Or?
I don't have a fancy badge, but I can give you a business card that's at least a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, cool, man. No, that's good. So you're a fitness man?
I am.
Catch you eating some chips, but
yeah. Don't tell anyone that they're eating chips out there. But at some point, we'll just take those away and replace it with protein shakes, won't we?
Good man. Yeah. Shout out, get a plug there, get a sponsorship. What's your go-to sport, man? What do you enjoy doing?
In high school, I was playing a lot of different sports: rugby, tennis, some cricket, etc.
Nice.
But lately, last sort of 5 or 6 years, I've actually was living in Norway, and there were just no tennis courts anywhere. Even though actually now Norway's got a top 5 tennis player. But still, where I was living, there was just like no tennis courts. And so I ended up just sort of going, look, I'm going to just pick a sport that suits the conditions. And so I ended up going with triathlon.
I think triathlon, you're not reliant on booking something. You don't need a partner. You can kind of just hit the road and get into it.
Yeah, you can be flexible. And I think there's something about racing which I love. And I love to compete. And so being able to train, be disciplined, be diligent, get fit, watch your diet, but then race and just sort of see all that hard work sort of unfold on a race day with a good time is really, really rewarding. So
put yourself to the test.
Yeah. So I'm kind of built for the more endurance sports. I was never any good at the aggression sports like rugby and other kinds of football. So I really love the endurance and the get as fit as you can kind of a sport.
Yeah, that's good. Do you take that? Do you sort of take that mentality into your work at all? And give us a bit of a rundown on what your work is like at the moment.
Obviously, I think being an economist, I think having a strong work ethic is really important.
Yeah.
I think also just in our organisation, HIA, we represent about 80,000 members across Australia. And so...
Can we, just so people get an understanding, can you sort of just tell what HIA is and what the membership, what's like your average member?
Yep. HIA, Housing Industry Association for Australia. We're the largest residential building industry body or association in Australia. And so we represent essentially all kinds of organisations, businesses, companies that are engaged in residential building industry.
So even down to the 4-man building crew in South Victoria doing residential.
We represent and advocate and service single sole traders.
Yeah.
All the way up to some of the largest volume builders in the country.
Yeah, cool.
We have members that are across, large detached houses, but then we have members that build high rises, so developers. And so we've got that whole spectrum. But we also not only service the builders, we service the suppliers, the manufacturers, the surveyors, all the rest, or fill in all the blanks. We represent them and act in their interests and provide services to them.
So what's like your general service that you guys, like when you say, I'm a quantity surveyor, we help builders price jobs. What's your guys' service if it sounds real?
Yeah, so we provide a whole host of services. In terms of the member services specifically, we do things like provide contracts for businesses. contract templates. We provide insurance services. We provide various educational tools. We have HIA apprentices, and so we actually can be the conduit to provide apprentices
to
for builders.
Companies. Like if a builder's looking for an apprentice, you guys will help.
We're
house
the conduit.
Yeah, interesting.
So we do that.
Yeah.
We just advise on all things related to accreditation, insurance, all those really important things for a builder to be successful. But then we also do advocacy, or we really act on behalf at the federal, state and local government level as well. So we're really acting on behalf of industry. We're in the halls of Parliament House. We're speaking publicly in the media on a regular basis. So I was just interviewing with a newspaper yesterday, advocating for more skilled labour to be, trained up here in Australia, but then also the pathways from overseas. And so we're always acting on behalf of industry. Yeah.
Okay.
Overwhelmed by pricing jobs well into the night? Feeling clients' pressure waiting on you to deliver estimates? Are you enjoying any kind of life outside of work? RapidQS wants to help you nail wins consistently, building momentum within the amount of jobs in your pipeline. Gain today by getting accurate pricing, receiving client confidence, and especially getting onto the job. RapidQS is your go-to for pre-construction estimates. We guarantee a quick turnaround within 24 hours with a proposal, making it super easy to work with us. Just send a pack of information via email, include plans if you have them, or just a scope, any images, and of course labour rates, whether it's labour only or a full takeoff. And you know what? We'll do the rest. Gain momentum today with RapidQS. Get in touch now and start enjoying your life outside of work.
Really want to dig into some of that stuff. What's like your main role and day-to-day with being an economist, senior level economist?
So it's varied. Give you a bit of an insight into a day. Might be I'm working on a report in the morning. So a recent one, for example, in the last week has been our trade availability index, where we're looking at the ongoing shortage of skilled trades in Australia, and is that worsening or is it getting any better? So might be writing a report. We might then do a little bit of liaison with, say, a government representative. We're feeding that kind of information to government. Maybe I'm talking to a member, just helping them out on some sort of, what an economic factor or a housing factor that they might be interested in.
Quick question there. Sorry to cut you off. I think this will be good. So say, for example, if I type in Australian news and I see residential builder goes bust, owes $10 million. Are you guys sort of before the paper calling you, you're calling the paper? Does that anything to do with you guys?
Yeah, so oftentimes we're providing the data, the research, the reports that the newspaper then takes and prints, or the television takes and prints.
So who tells you? Does someone tell you guys?
So we do our own surveying. So we HIA are a massive storehouse of data and information. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we'll often use things like the Australian Bureau of Statistics, their data. So that's publicly accessible data. That's the federal government's biggest data agency. So we might take their data, which can be incredibly complex.
I was going to say, man, I don't think any residential builder is going to find the time to dig through that and be like, what do I do with all this?
So what the residential builder wants to know is how many loans are being taken out to buy homes? How many buildings how many detached houses did we approve in the month of June? They want to know those things. They want to know how many housing completions were there in 2023. That's the kind of stuff they want to know. But we're the conduit between this enormous statistical agency called the Australian Bureau of Statistics and their data releases. We take that information and we report, we present to the media and members and government. This is what that data's saying, and here's what it means, so that in a digestible way.
Going back to that, like how does that look? The moment something like that happens, like say I've had a building company and I go broke, how does it get to the news? Do you know the process? Because I'm always fascinated when an article comes out. I'm like, are you talking shit, or is it actually happening?
I can speak for Australia. In Australia, insolvency numbers, I would say for the most part are printed with us. You can be confident there's an accuracy there. It comes from the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, or we call it ASIC. So they, when a company's declaring itself insolvent or bankrupt, then then that gets reported to the regulator, and the regulator actually reports that data. It's not just available to HIA, that's publicly available information. So a journalist can get a hold of it, a builder can get a hold of it. But I think what's really important is someone like our economics team will actually look a little bit past just the number that comes out and be able to speak to what's actually going on. And for example, one trend in Australia right now is, yes, insolvencies have been elevated in the last year, but you know what? It's a lot of really small companies that maybe only got started recently. So maybe they got started, during a bit of a boom that we had in the COVID period where there was a lot of stimulus around, but that's since come off. That government stimulus, the government programs to boost building activity. They maybe got started around then. They were just 1 or 2 or 3 people, and then as activities kind of declined post stimulus period, now we're starting to see a bit of insolvencies. But it's not going off the charts here. It is a little bit above what it's been the last period. It's not like it's going crazy here to speak to that specific issue.
How big is the company? What's it made up of at the moment? And obviously you guys are verifying all this information.
I think what's unique, we're not just a commentator that's taking numbers and just making conclusions. We're a recognised, first of all, economics team. We're an organisation that's been around for over 100 years.
Wow.
Our members, as I said already, 80,000 plus members. Those members, they are on the ground. So if we in HIA Economics are, saying something that's, perhaps a little bit requires some adjustment, our members will let us know. So we've got we're in that great spot. We're able to see what the data's saying, but we've also, through our members, we're sort of in a sense on the ground as well, and we can see the trends on the ground. We're with our members on a regular basis. So
what would be like some of the top 5 trends or top trends that you guys are always kind of looking for and monitoring? I'm always thinking, what are building numbers going up? If I talk to our SEO guy, who's searching renovations, how many renovations a month? Like, you want to know mortgage approvals, you want to know anything that's related into more projects coming in.
Probably top 5 might be, this is a big one, land availability and pricing. That's a big one. That's almost your sort of biggest leading indicator, land availability and pricing.
Like subdivisions opening up, knowing how many sections.
Right. So land sales, I'd say building approvals, I'd say, so we get that kind of data of a mix of different typology of housing as well. So, big detached houses all the way through to, single units, 1-bedroom apartments. So building approvals, I'd say housing finance, so loans. So we get data on loans to first home buyers, owner occupiers, investors. We get it by national, we get it state level. And so we can sort of see, okay, demand's picking up. We can see demand's picking up because of the number of loans that are being taken out. And probably the last one's probably housing starts. So as you would know, and our audience would know, approvals don't always translate to a start. So, and we've actually seen that, especially in medium to high density, that's been a bit bumpy lately, and where we've seen this discrepancy lately, unusual discrepancy between an approval to commencement.
To hitting the ground, jobs actually starting.
Exactly. That's been elevated, and that's due to that pipeline's been elevated, and some of those approvals are not translating to starts, and that's due to a host of issues such as credit constraints, building material cost escalation, labour cost escalation. And so a lot of those, especially medium to high density projects, aren't going from approval to commencement, or they're taking a long time in that pipeline.
How often are you guys sort of updating, say, what comes in as trends, and then how do you get that information out to members? Is it all just like a monthly email pack update? How do you voice this?
So we've got sort of essentially a raft of reports that our members, really enjoy, and it helps them, and just helps them do well in their business and in their operations. And then obviously government's interested in those reports too. So our central bank, the Reserve Bank, they're sweating on certain reports of ours for their own publications. So we're reporting. We're also putting out. We're also doing regular presentations. That's really important as well. We're around Australia, my whole team, I think, spread out all in different places today.
Cool.
Just presenting in different places.
Yeah, and, like stuff like this, or like how are you guys doing it?
So we might do it through this kind of format, podcasting. We might do it through.
Do you guys host one, or how do you do?
We actually do. Yeah, HIA's got a podcast.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so you can get a hold of that and follow that. I actually did some recording for that last week. Actually,
yeah, you're a pro, man.
And
how often do you guys upload on there?
Great question. I'm actually not 100% sure about that,
We'll
but I'd say consistently.
Consistently is a good word.
But
nice.
Ryan could probably tell you the answer to that.
Yeah.
But the other thing we're doing is we're constantly presenting. We have our own HIA events, breakfasts, etc., where we'll do presentations. But we're also obviously presenting at other residential building forums. I was at a banking forum last week.
That's cool.
Doing a presentation on the housing situation. So that's another key way we're getting our information out. And then increasingly social media. Yeah. Social media is becoming really important.
Your guys' Instagram is good. I'd love to. I love looking at the social stuff. Like I've learned so much just from putting certain things out on social media, what you can get back. But I'd love to know if you guys are doing 15 stories a day. But that's a marketing question.
We could always get better. So if you've got any tips, let us know.
Yeah, 100%. First thing, I noticed I've just been taking notes. You guys obviously help builders find apprentices.
Yep.
What are the numbers looking at in regards of you noticed jobs going to consent and then approval dropping off? What about apprentices signing up to TAFE, going through that, transitioning to an apprenticeship to sign off as a builder, carpenter?
Yeah, so I can tell you there's 114,000 apprentices in training in Australia right now.
Yeah.
And that's out of a total residential building workforce of 277,000.
Yeah.
So we've got 114,000 in training. We estimate right now that we have a shortfall of, this is skilled tradespeople, of about 83,000. We think we need another 83,000 skilled tradespeople
across
to go
the board,
straight into the national workforce, spread out across Australia, straight into the national workforce in order to build our federal government's stated target, which is 1.2 million homes over 5 years.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So, which, by the way, we've never, ever done that before.
Yeah.
And so it's 240,000 homes a year. We've never, ever done that before.
What's the biggest home builder delivering on a yearly basis? Public or private?
The biggest, one of the biggest
volume
builders. Yeah, one of the biggest volume builders might do, I think, about 30,000.
30,000. Yeah, that's quite big. And then it would just tailor down to private guys and then I take it, eh? It seems to be every other company is like a big company going broke. I just feel like it's there's way more trust and transparency with smaller builders, custom home builders, guys with 10 guys on. I feel like they're more reliable to making sure their job makes a profit, not like holding their reputation. I don't know. Do you guys you obviously have members in the high end, the low end. You know, what are the problems there?
Yeah, we've got members at the whole spectrum. So small, large, medium, or everything in between. As I said, we cover manufacturing, suppliers, builders, all plumbers, all of it. Yeah. I think the worst of the insolvencies is behind us. So the insolvency issue is one that it attracts a lot of media attention.
I know.
The media just eats it up. To be honest with you, I think it gets inflated to something more than it is.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say it's not been hard for our members. It really has been a very difficult time for our members. So I would just want to really state that on the record. It's been a really difficult time for our members, and there's a host of reasons for that. But the insolvencies issue, it sort of gets a bit blown up in the media.
Yeah.
I think the worst of it's behind. We had a perfect storm. In Australia, we had all this stimulus go into the industry in the COVID period to keep it upright and in a stable place. But the thing with stimulus, there's always the aftermath.
Yeah, man.
And so
I feel like people don't think about that enough, eh?
No, and that's the challenge is the aftermath is tough. It's in economics, we kind of call it's a bit of a market distortion because it's sort of, we go from this business as usual to then suddenly we had a pandemic, and so we don't fault the government, but we then had all this stimulus come in but then that expires. And and then we find ourselves trying to recover from not just a pandemic, but trying to recover from a stimulus period. But then throw on top of that the supply chain disruptions.
Yeah.
So as our audience would know, the building material cost escalation from those supply chain disruptions went gangbusters. Some building materials here in Australia over the pandemic went up as much as 60% in terms of the price escalation.
Yeah.
But then we had the skilled labour shortage really exacerbated after the pandemic.
Yeah.
We had our borders closed here, as was the case in New Zealand. And it just distorted the market. And then the government said, okay, now we're going to roll out this massive public sector infrastructure program. We're going to build offices, data centres, bridges, stadiums, all the rest of it. Well, guess what? Some of the residential building workforce is flexible and can move across the sectors.
Yeah.
And so they've seen the opportunities in non-residential engineering construction, and they're transitioning over there. And now as the market confidence is starting to return, we're starting to bounce back in residential building. The workers just aren't there that we need right now.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, you've got to go where the money is. And I don't know, man, I feel like commercial and industrial, there's longer fixed term contracts there and sometimes better rates. So why would you go back to building resi?
100%, 100%. And I've got not only members that are doing that, I've got personal friends that are doing that. If you're in a market like Sydney, it's not really bouncing back yet. Perth is going well. It's in a strong position, but Sydney's not bouncing back. So if you're a builder in Sydney, you might be looking at non-residential just to stay, profitable and keep your head above water, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. How do you guys determine like a market going well? Like Perth, for example. I lived there when I was like 21, building this one when I was coaching tennis at Cottesloe, and I was building dongers during the week. But it was crazy then. It was like the mining era. But then how do you guys determine what's good and what's bad? Is it purely just jobs going through, builders emailing, hey man, we've got no work, we're closing up shop? Like, what do you guys determine?
I think again, we're in that fortunate position where at HIA we can look at what the data's saying, but then we're with our members getting their feedback. We're hearing their experience.
So it's a mix of trends and what's actually happening.
But what I would say is that the numbers in a sense don't lie. Like, so, Perth might be in its boom period, might have been building, say, 30,000 a year, something like that, but then suddenly they're at 21,000. Well, we can see right there that it's a softer period. And so what we know is the numbers don't lie. And so what we're looking at is what's been the trend over the last, say, 10 years in particular, and then we get a feel for what's a cyclical downturn, what's elevated.
What's just a market downturn.
And also what the market can sustain. So what can the businesses that are in the industry, that they have a capacity. So are they at full capacity, or are they reporting to us, we can take on more work. We got time, we got the workers, we got the materials available, we can take on more work. So through that data, as well as that feel that we get from the builder, from the member, we get a bit of especially with their capacity, we get a bit of a feel for what they can actually do and where they'd like to be versus where they perhaps are now.
When you guys talk about a shortage of apprentices, and obviously we talk about like immigration and people coming in, skilled labour, would you say, like, do members sort of say, what kind of people they would prefer coming into their business, whether it's like young Australian males coming out of school and through TAFE, or like are the overseas workers are they more preferred, because the Filipinos are hard workers, man. They're amazing.
They really are.
They're so good.
They really are. Look, I think our members are pretty balanced in their approach, and I think that they are just happy for as long as the individual's a hard worker, they've got certain attributes, they're willing to really get stuck in and develop, implement a strong work ethic. They've got to have the skills. So
it's so hard
really important.
If you've got the pipeline there to take on another 4 projects, and you're like, you've got to make hay while the sun shines, but you need 5, 6, 7 more carpenters. Builders are kind of like, man, I'll just take what I can get.
100%.
But that's also dangerous.
Exactly. And that's the situation over in Perth and parts of Western Australia right now. The biggest constraint on their capacity to build right now is the availability of labour. So that's not as much of an issue in Sydney right now or Melbourne. But if you talk to the builders and the industry in Perth, talk to the builders and industry in Southeast Queensland, this is a major constraint, is that they are up against, as I said earlier, this massive infrastructure pipeline funded by our federal government, which we're not saying that's bad, that's fine. But in many respects, we're competing for the same pool of workers.
Absolutely.
And so while it's great that we're building stadiums and bridges and office buildings and data centers, that's great. But at the same time, we need to be building houses.
Yeah.
And as is the case in New Zealand, we've just had a big spike in migration.
Yeah, man.
And so honestly, we could afford to build a surplus of housing for the next 5 or 10 years, and that'd actually be fine.
Yeah.
That would actually be okay in terms of meeting the demand for housing.
Yeah.
That wouldn't cause a crash. We wouldn't have a massive price correction.
Yeah.
That would actually be fine because of that really elevated level of underlying housing demand that we have here.
Yeah.
We need to focus on apprentices here at home.
Yeah.
We need to focus on initiatives such as employer subsidies that take on apprentices.
Do you guys
That's
have
really
much,
key.
sorry to cut you off, do you guys have much involvement in those kind of things, like subsidies and like marketing campaigns to kids at high schools to go into the trades and,
So we were really instrumental in the commencement and the continuation of the federal government's employer subsidy program for taking on apprentices.
Yeah.
So HIA, we advocate for that. We were in the ears of the ministers and MPs saying we need to support the employers that choose to take on an apprentice.
Yeah.
We need to provide them adequate financial support to take on these apprentices. They're busy. They have limited time, limited capacity. They're investing in a future builder, future bricklayer, future tiler, future plasterer, future concreter. They're investing in that person, often a young person. They need to be supported in that and rewarded for that because we need a lot more apprentices.
Yeah, man.
But at the same time, we're saying to government, we need to bring in overseas workers and we need to do a lot better at that. In the last, at the moment, I think we only have a little under 4,000 overseas workers
that's
on a skilled trades visa.
How long does it take to get those
okay.
visas?
Yeah.
It's quite short. Is it a short turnaround to get those?
It depends a little bit. It depends
yeah.
on the occupation. It depends a little bit, and it depends a little bit on the location.
Yeah.
But it can be anywhere between 6 months to really about 2 years.
That's a long time, man.
We need expediency there.
So you said under 4,000 from overseas?
Under 4,000 currently on a overseas skills visa for our industry.
How many do you think we need?
Trade. I think we could easily ratchet that up to say, I think we could easily have another 30,000.
Yeah. But do we have the houses to put them in?
That's another issue.
Yeah.
You hit on a key issue there. And so we need, we need to really, that's why we're advocating for support for our technological advancement, especially around like modular housing and prefab housing. While it's not a silver bullet and it's not going to fix our housing issues, it's one part of the solution.
Yeah, for sure.
So that modular and prefab construction is actually important for the future.
Yeah, I've seen those. I've was a part of one in Queenstown. It was like near the hotel overlooking Onsen Hot Pools.
Yep.
And it was cool, man. But like they're good and they're bad. Like it was awesome to see a whole floor of like 12 apartments go in like 5 days.
Yep.
But then if one portion of the pre-slab floor was out by 20 or 30 mil and when they dropped the unit on, all the tiles cracked. So it was like, we got to retile the whole unit. But anyway, that's the story.
But you know what? In Australia, New Zealand and elsewhere, we can do it. And I'll tell you where we have had to do it is when we've hosted an Olympics.
Yeah.
So we've had to do that fast short-term accommodation. Another one is in the mining industry.
Yeah.
So in Australia, the mining industry operates in very remote areas in certain places, particularly WA. We've got to have, you and I know, we have had to quickly build, more of that modular short-term style housing in those kinds of regions. So we can do it. If government says, hey, we don't want to bring too many in because where are we going to put them? We would respond by saying, well, we do it for the Olympics and we do it for the mining sector.
Yeah.
So we can do it.
Do you think I don't know, man, they might be getting off topic, but do you think they purposely like hold back on all that stuff for certain reasons? Like, because there's always a solution to a problem, man, all the time.
I think the issue is we're starting to wake up to the fact that we have a housing crisis here. Yeah. Our members have been saying that for a while in terms of we're constrained in our home building by various things, regulation, excessive taxation, things like that, availability of labour. They've been saying, hey, these are issues that we need to deal with, and that's been around for a long time. I think governments are realising now we've got an issue. We need to really ratchet up our response, and we need to get our policy settings right. Yeah. But I think where we've got a ways to go is what are those ideal policy settings to really enable private sector builders and manufacturers, suppliers, all of it, all our skills to get going with the housing. Yeah. And so we're still in, the halls of Parliament saying we're taxing housing too much. Yeah, we're still saying we need to look at the pace of the regulation. Yeah. The regulation's coming thick and fast. We've got to look at the pace of that regulation. Yeah. So
pace and cost of red tape to build a house, like that's such a bad problem, man. Like you can build a house as quick as it takes people to sign the paperwork. Yep. And the cost is like over sometimes 15% to do the paperwork. Yep. It's like, are you guys in a position to put pressure? Like, do you guys put pressure on these guys to sort that stuff out?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's what are the responses? That's our MO. So we're meeting with federal, state, local government. We're meeting with housing bodies. We're meeting with regulators. Yeah. And this week we're meeting with something in Australia called the Productivity Commission to discuss these issues. Yeah. And so we're saying, hey, when we are for resilient, sustainable, safe homes. Yeah. We are for that. Our members want resilient, sustainable,
not dropping
safe
quality,
homes.
Not doing.
We don't
want
to drop the quality. We're not saying that.
But these builders are good, man. Like they can do stuff. Houses don't take long to build.
Absolutely. Yeah. But sometimes what happens is that we get out of balance where the regulation starts to impinge on our ability to supply according to what the need is. Okay. And so that's where we start to have a conversation. We start to write reports. We submit to government. We report to Senate economics and Senate committee hearings. Yeah, wow. We start to say, hey, again, we're for safe, sustainable housing in Australia, high quality. We're for the National Construction Code, but we need to look at the pace and the cost that's imposed on industry. And we need to talk about that because if we don't get that right, we will put the brakes on the supply of housing according to our demand.
Yeah. What are some things you guys talk about within your business? Take a water, it's all good. I'm fascinated by the whole, the red tape and the council stuff because I feel like it's just like a money ticket clipping zone and it's like it doesn't need to be there. When you guys take these ideas to them, do they reply with like common sense related like good answers or is it a whole lot of riff-raff and you don't really get an answer? Like it must be painful.
It's a mix of both. Yeah. Sometimes we come out encouraged and we get wins and we're grateful for the wins that we get and HIA continues to get big wins on things. Reduction in really inefficient, inequitable taxes like stamp duty, transfer duty.
That's so
when
much,
we get
man.
those reductions in those taxes or exemptions, concessions, we get those wins all the time. We're really happy.
If you know off the top of your head, what's like a win for you guys? Just a small example.
Yeah, I mean, a win for us is, say, a complete removal of stamp duty on the purchase of a new home.
Yeah, cool.
That for us is a no-brainer policy.
That's a huge one.
Encourage especially first-home buyers, but encourage all buying cohorts to buy new homes and don't put an inefficient, inequitable tax on it called stamp duty, which if it's the median house price in Sydney for a new house is probably about 1.1 million. So you think about stamp duty could be up to sort of, $60,000 or something on a new home. And so in that instance, we actually could be more than 60,000.
Yeah. Is it a percentage? It's a percentage.
Yeah, it depends on the jurisdiction.
Oh, okay, cool.
So it depends a little bit.
Yeah.
But just take away stamp duty and encourage people, give buyers that leg up into being able to buy a new house. Yeah. Encourage new home building. Don't deter new home building like that. So a win for us is a stamp duty exemption, for example. A win for us is the removal of an infrastructure levy from a state or local government. And in answer to your question, sometimes we get those wins and then sometimes we come out scratching our heads a little bit going, well, we've just got to do some more work. Yeah. We've got to educate government and policymakers on these issues and explain to them this is impinging on our rate of building, and that's a problem. It's going to push prices up.
Yeah. And obviously I love people that do all this hard work and push like common sense. Like when someone asks me, are you political? I'm like, I'm not political. I just love like something can be done so much faster, but why does it have to come at a huge cost and time?
Yep.
And so obviously the work you guys do is amazing, but at the end of the day, if the governments are fighting you guys on all this, essentially the taxpayers paying for all this time as well. So it's like, it seems like a never-ending win of like, you're going to fight these battles, but then the longer it takes, the more it costs the taxpayer. And then when you get it, they'll just find another tax on something else.
Yeah, and I think we feel at HIA, our responsibility is to be a voice for our members.
Yeah,
and
that's powerful.
That's what we're doing. We're a voice at Parliament House, at state and local government level, with the regulators. We're a voice on behalf of our members. But we also, what we're doing is we're educating. Yeah. And so our housing system is complex. The supply chain is quite complex.
Yeah.
And so we're educating on how we can improve that supply chain and keep costs down.
Where do you think the biggest bottleneck is in the building space from what you guys see in here?
It's in a few different places, but I think a big one that comes to mind immediately is we have an undersupply of both infill and greenfield land for residential development. We have an undersupply, and we've had that in place for the best part of 20 years.
What's the solution?
The solution is we've got to have an expedited rate of land release.
Yeah.
And we need the right kind of land release, which is a combination of both infill, brownfield sites, rezoned sites, as in, close to that existing infrastructure, both the water, sewerage, etc., but also the transport and roads and amenities. Yeah. So we need that infill development, that infill land release. But we can't neglect the fact that we need greenfield land release as well. Yeah. And so we need a combination of both. And if we don't have a combination, and that's according to consumer preferences as well. Yeah. If we don't have that combination of both, then what we're going to see is we're going to just see the cost of land increase.
Yeah.
And in certain markets like Sydney, it's actually probably the biggest catalyst to affordability issues is the price of land, if you look at Sydney.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. When we talk about like materials, obviously, what were the biggest increases you guys saw, and what's like the future trend, if you guys know, for the next 12 to 18 months, if you guys know percentages of dropping?
So we've seen big increases in concrete. We've seen big increases in electric cabling. We've seen big increases in plaster. And then what we're expecting right now to see is a slowdown, but not a drop in price.
Okay.
So we expect that we'll see the rate of growth will slow, but it's not going to drop in price. So that only happens very rare occasions do we see the price of materials go back.
Yeah, unfortunately everything just keeps going up. But I mean, do you see rates of what guys are able to charge out at going up as well?
Yep. Yeah. What we are seeing is that the price of trades is above trend right now. Okay. So we look at in HIA Economics, we look at 12 key occupations in residential building.
Yeah.
Sort of pre-pandemic, the trend was that the price of those trades would be growing at about 2% a year.
Okay.
What we're seeing right now, it's at 3.4%. But that is slowing down.
That's everything to the charge out rate, hourly margin they can put on materials.
Yeah, it's sort of just that overall price of skilled trades.
Yeah.
It's still growing above trend. And that's speaking to the fact that we have a shortage.
Yeah.
Again, coming back to that issue of we're competing against other kinds of infrastructure development, but then also we're starting from an existing shortage. And as new home building's picking up in certain places in Australia, the demands for builders and suppliers and for all those occupations in building is starting to pick up as the market's starting to pick up.
Yeah.
So now's the time where we really, really need workers. Otherwise, it's only going to worsen.
But that must be good for your current members. Like they must be seeing a good pipeline of work at the moment. Like what are the current feedback from your members in regards to good comments, bad comments, good and bad?
Yeah, so I'd say it depends a bit what market you're operating
builder,
in. Yeah, so it depends a bit
renovations.
whether you're in Perth, Southeast Queensland, or you're in Sydney, or you're in Tasmania and Melbourne.
Yeah.
It's we're in a multi-speed market here in Australia.
Absolutely.
Big time multi-speed market. So I'd say that the sort of hotspot areas where activity's pretty good.
Yeah.
Definitely Perth, Southeast Queensland. So Brisbane's still looking really good. Adelaide's had a really good period as well. Where we're seeing activity slow to recover in the aftermath of the pandemic, Sydney, Melbourne, Tasmania.
It's just so expensive in Sydney and Melbourne, man.
Yep. And we do think it will pick up. We do expect it will, but it's just taking some time. But the other distinction I'd draw is we're seeing detached housing. We're seeing that sort of bounce back earlier than the medium to high density. Okay. So if you're building houses, townhouses, semi-detached, you can be. In many of our members are saying, "Yeah, we're okay, we're all right. We're not off to the races. We're definitely not booming, but we're looking okay."
Yeah.
But if you talk to members of ours that are in the medium to high density market, it's still really tough. High-rise apartments, it's tough, and a lot of those projects aren't going ahead. Actually.
Yeah. Yeah, so after they're coming out of council, just no one's got the money to fund them.
They've got an approval. They're not getting the developers are not getting the credit.
Yeah.
They're lacking the skilled trades because they're off somewhere else in the resources sector, and understandably so.
Yeah.
So the cost escalation of materials, the lack of skilled labour, the lack of credit is an issue. They're struggling to get credit, and that feeds. That's based off the fact that maybe they don't have the pre-sales that they need for the bank to be
keep
satisfied.
The projects get going,
And so, and then there's investors, which are really important to that. High-rise residential building. Investors are being spooked in certain markets. Particularly like Melbourne, because we're putting silly taxes like a short stay Airbnb tax in play. The state government there's just introduced a short stay quote Airbnb tax, and investors don't like that.
Do you guys look at that and kind of try and jump on that straight away and be like, hey, this is a huge
100%.
Yeah.
Yep. I was on radio 2 weeks ago on Melbourne Radio 3AW.
That's cool, man.
Just saying we can't do this. This is not beneficial for housing supply. This is not beneficial for supply and affordability. Because investors they might have a short-term renter, they might have a long-term renter. And we can talk about those details in greater depth. But the point is, what we don't want is investors being deterred because of additional costs. And they don't like uncertainty. If they're feeling a bit nervous about the state government's tax agenda, that they'll go, okay, I'll go into Southeast Queensland.
Yeah, exactly. They'll just move their money elsewhere.
I'll go over to Perth, where it's going well, and I feel more confident about the policy settings, the tax settings there.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like the angle from a residential builder to a developer is always like, I hate working for the developer, blah, blah, blah. But they're the ones putting the money at risk. They're the ones doing the building. They're the ones giving out all the work. So really it's like we need to keep the developers happy. They're the ones taking the risk and putting 100%. The work on the table, man.
Yeah, and we need to, we advocate the government really needs to take care of our developers because actually what we need a lot more of in Australia is that medium to high density, especially with more lone person households, more students, where really a lot of students come to Australia. And then also in terms of what's affordable, most first home buyers can't afford a 4-bedroom house. They need they start with an apartment. So we need more apartments here in Australia. So we need to take care of our developers.
100%. In regards to the material stuff, do you think there's enough competition in the material sector to keep prices down? Or do you think it's kind of the big key players hold all the cards and they kind of...
I probably couldn't comment too definitively on that.
That's right.
I would just say that I think we could afford to have additional supply of building materials, and that's just based on the fact that we've still got a rate of cost escalation that's probably we'd call it above trend right now. So I think the suppliers sector of the industry, the supply sector, building material supply sector of the industry, I don't think that there's any sort of monopoly in there. I think that we could afford to have additional suppliers come in, and I think that we could afford to have, I think it wouldn't be a really terrible thing if the cost escalation in building materials slowed down a touch.
Yeah.
I think that would be okay.
Yeah, no, 100%. What do you guys sort of see forecast next 12 months? And just imagine small residential guy about to go out on his own, try and start winning some work. What advice would you sort of give to them about going and doing stuff on their own?
I actually think we can have a positive outlook now, and not just in Perth, Southeast Queensland, etc. I think across the board, what we are seeing is market confidence starting to return.
Yeah.
So how do I justify that? Well, we look at those leading indicators. So the loans for housing. Yeah. So the loans to purchase or build a home, looking good, actually bouncing back. So new home sales. So HIA produces a new home sales report on a monthly basis, and that takes some of our largest volume builders, and we sort of essentially are the storehouse for, and we draw upon their data of how many contracts they've signed for the purchase to build a new home. And so that's a really forward-looking leading indicator of future activity. So that's a really early indicator of future activity. So looking at those two, lending for purchasing or building, signing a contract to build a home, those are looking promising. We're seeing incremental increases on a monthly basis in those leading indicators. So we're starting to see that market confidence return. What's helping that is we haven't had an interest rate increase in about a year now. Yeah. That's really helped. Unemployment rate is pretty stable, so the jobs market's pretty strong, and we're seeing real incomes actually stabilise. And so with that, we can actually feel confident looking ahead. Hopefully, the next interest rate move is down. That's our expectation.
When are they meant to put that out?
We don't think it's going to happen before Christmas. Okay. Hopefully, first quarter of next year, but we would expect definitely before halfway through next year.
Yeah.
And so with that, I think we're starting to see first home buyers come back. Trade up buyers are pretty active. Investors have been active for some months now, for the best part of 6 months.
Do you know where most of the investors are coming from? And are they Australian investors, outside investors? A mix of both?
It's a mix of both.
Percentage, roughly?
I couldn't tell you the exact percentage right now, but it's definitely majority are domestic investors. Okay, cool. And we like to refer to them here as mum and dad investors.
Yeah, nice.
And by the way, a lot of those investors are not uber rich, guys with 10 houses around Australia. A lot of those investors are actually millennials, middle to slightly upper income earners that are just looking to build up their capital.
Yeah, nice.
And so they might be 27-year-olds that are, working as in a bank, or they might be 27-year-olds, working as a senior teacher in a school. And so those investors are feeling more and more confident, and they've been coming back in for the best part of 6 months. So I'd say the signs are encouraging, and I think builders can be, and suppliers and manufacturers and all the rest can be encouraged looking ahead. I think we're starting to see green shoots of that recovery, especially in detached.
Yeah. Now we probably do, like I think I was saying, 50 to 60 reports to builders a month at the moment. Pretty small. We're expecting it to jump. But definitely seeing a lot of guys with a lot of confidence. But the one thing is, when they send us through quote packs, it's either if they don't have enough work, they're not marketing hard enough. But if they do have more than enough work, they're doing plenty of marketing and they seem to be winning.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I'd like to see you guys on TikTok, but I feel like the tradies that are marketing and putting themselves out there, they're the ones that are doing like really well, which is good to see. Yep. And the rates are high as well. Like foreman rates and project manager rates are upwards of $95, $110 an hour. Like it's so attractive.
And that's why we're out there saying, hey, consider a career in residential building.
Absolutely.
Because it's got great long-term employment prospects.
Absolutely.
It's a viable career. The benefits are high. Yeah. It's rewarding, and you can get really good salary. You can be remunerated really well for the hard work you're doing. So we're saying it all the time.
I feel like there could be great advertising pitches to kids in schools like, hey, next year you could earn 65 grand a year versus your mate who's going to go and study X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
All for study and education, don't get me wrong. But you can also, I know a lot of guys that started off being a builder or a tradie and have done other things, but you don't come out with debt. I think it's real attractive. I definitely think they're going to be the next millionaires, man. They'll be, it's going to be more popular than the white collars, you know.
And HIA is out there where we're really conveying that message on a daily basis.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. I think just to give people an idea, I think I heard your colleague say you guys have over 400, 500 staff.
Yeah,
is that
I think
right?
Close to 400.
That's huge business. What's the Christmas party like?
Pretty good. Definitely you receive a ham, so that's what I'm pleased about. So you go home with a nice ham. So that was the big reward.
Nice.
We've got a great culture.
That's cool, man.
I've actually had 2 stints at HIA. Actually, they call me the boomerang because I won one of the boomerangs. I came back because I had such a good initial experience early on in my career that I came back.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm excited about what we're going to be doing going forward.
Cool, man. Yeah, I love the construction space, man. I'm just passionate about helping the builders that aren't good on the business side try and just make more money, because I think it's a hard slog industry, man. But it's also very rewarding, you know. So cool. Thank you very much for traveling, man. Much appreciated and good to meet you.
Yeah, great to be with you, and thanks for your time.
Cheers, man. Awesome.